Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Phrasal Verbs Crime. My name is Charles, and I am your host for today. I hope you are all doing well, that you have had a great start to your week and a good Tuesday, of course. And I hope that everyone is staying safe as well. For those of you who are here with us live, I would like to kindly ask if you could just let me know how our connection is today. So if you can hear me, you can see me, please just let me know if our connection is all right. Before we continue, of course, I want to make sure that everything is all right with today's connection. So if it is, then mission's accomplished. I'm glad. But so far, it seems like our connection is all right. And we have a bunch of people here today. Hi, hello, Camilla. Hello, Paulina. Hello, Mihao. Hello, Christian. Oh my God, lots of people. I'm not able to go over everyone's names, but it seems that our connection is all right. That's awesome. I'm glad to meet you all and see you all today. But before we go ahead and hop and to our topic today, I would just like to go ahead and introduce myself to those of you who are not familiar with me. As I mentioned already, my name is Charles. I am one of the Tutlo tutors here today. And beyond that, I am also one of the webinar hosts, which is why you see me here. But of course, with today's connection, if there are a few issues, maybe lags or something like that, my apologies. We've had quite of a big rainstorm in my area the past few days, so it has interfering with our connection, but I do believe it's all right now, so it should stay strong. If there are any issues, don't let me know, and of course, I'll do my best to troubleshoot it from my side. All right, but it seems that there's a little bit of a lag for some people, so my apologies for that if there is, but it seems that for the rest it's okay. So that's good to see. But yeah, the lags, that's maybe my fault on my side, so we'll try to fix that out. All right, but I would like to just go ahead and give this chance for everyone who's joining us, as there are a few new names who have popped up, a few people who have joined us. We're just about to go ahead and dive into today's webinar. But before we do, just a couple reminders to everyone here today. The first thing I would like to remind everyone how long we will be here. If this is your first time joining us for a webinar, we typically do our webinars around 30 minutes, which is about a half hour. So we started today's webinar at 7 p.m. So that means we will try and finish today at around 7:30. So within the next 25 minutes, we will try and wrap up and, of course, be respectful of everyone's time here today. So I'll try to finish as close to on time as I can. Now, along with that, I encourage you, our chat is open for everyone today. So if you would like to make comments about what we're learning, maybe even participate in some activities we will have, then please go ahead. Our chat will be open for that. We will even have a Q&A, a question and answer at the end of today's webinar, where if you have any questions, you can just ask us in the chat, and I will do my best to answer your questions at the end of our webinar. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's dive into what exactly are we talking about today. So, of course, with the topic of phrasal verbs, we want to talk about how to understand phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are one of those things that are typically used by native speakers or people who have used this language for a long. Every language has. In English, we have them. In my other language here in the Philippines that I speak, Tagalog, we have them, and so on and so forth. There are some terms and expressions that are quite unique to every culture, every language, and phrasal verbs are one of those things, because oftentimes if we look at a phrasal verb, it can be quite confusing if we go ahead and try and understand everything, because sometimes they don't make a lot of sense. So we have to take the time to practice this, make sure we're familiar with them. And of course, since that's our main topic for today, and learning phrasal verbs is our main topic, we want to, of course, talk about how to understand phrasal verbs. That way it will make it a lot easier for everyone. And along with that, of course, we want to go over phrasal verbs for today's topic, right? Crime and punishment. So we'll talk about, the crimes, the way phrasal verbs can be used in that situation, or the way that phrasal verbs can be used in other situations related to crime and punishment. And of course, we want to talk about how to use phrasal verbs properly. When we talk about phrasal verbs, there are some rules we need to cover, whether that would be, I guess, when to use them, how to change the tense, sometimes how we change them. We'll focus on that as well. So we want to have a nice, well-rounded lesson, of course, focusing on phrasal verbs with crime and punishment, but we want to go beyond that, of course, so that you'll be able to apply what we've learned into your language skills. All right, so I hope that clearly explains everything that we're going to be talking about today. Let's go ahead now and dive into our first point, right? Our first area of discussion on how to understand phrasal verbs. So what exactly is a phrasal verb? Now, a phrasal verb is explained as an idiomatic expression that is made up of a verb and a word or words. So how do we understand phrasal verbs? There are two main parts to talk about. So actually, that's not a great line. Here we go. It's a better line. We'll talk about the two main parts. Number one is, what is a phrasal verb? It's an idiomatic expression. That's the first thing we have to understand. The second thing is, what makes a phrasal verb? Well, it's made of a verb and a word or words. So those are the two main parts we have to understand what a phrasal verb is. Now, we'll go to the first point on the idea of idiomatic expression. So what does that mean if it's an idiomatic expression? Well, an idiomatic expression, like I mentioned earlier, is something unique to either native speakers of the language, or it's unique to people who are fluent in them. Because if we look at phrasal verbs, a lot of the times the meanings or the definitions of these phrasal verbs, like I mentioned, can be quite confusing. Because again, they are typically expressions that are native to people who have learned the language. So for us, as we learn new languages, right, we have to adapt to their idiomatic expressions in those languages. So that's the first thing to understand. Are they confusing? Yes. All right. A lot of the times it takes practice and it takes time to actually study phrasal verbs to know what they mean. The second part to understand is, what makes a phrasal verb? Well, a verb, and typically a word at most, or maybe a couple other words attached to them. Maybe we'll have a preposition or something like that. So our two main parts is a verb, so an action word, and then maybe one word or two words next to it. And you combine them together into one, and that is a phrasal verb. All right. So we have the two main parts to understand. They're idiomatic expressions, and they are made of a word and typically a verb together, maybe sometimes two words. Let's look at a couple examples of phrasal verbs that we use often, and we'll understand typically just what a phrasal verb is. So, for example, if we have the phrasal verb that something will fall through, it simply means that something will fit All right. Hello, everyone. Am I back? I think I got disconnected. I think I got kicked out. So I'm so sorry for that. If everyone is here, can you guys hear and see me again? I'm so sorry. I think I got cut off. All right. I'm so sorry. My apologies, everyone. Um, all right. Awesome. We're okay now. All right. All right. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My apologies. Please forgive me. All right. So anyway, let's go ahead. Let's get back to it. So we were talking about what these phrasal verbs mean, right? Like I said, fall through, you look at those words separately, they make no sense. But because we connect them, they equal that phrasal verb of fall through, and it means to fail to happen. And of course, with that being said, another example that typically we could use is to bring up someone. Now, if we bring up someone, it actually means to look after a child till it's grown. So basically, if you're bringing up a child, you look after them, so you feed them, you take care, bring them to school, put them to sleep, and you take care of them until they are a grown up, so they can take care of themselves, typically around teenagers or adult years. So if I have to bring up a child, it means I just have to look after said child until it's grown. But again, if we look at those words separately, right, bring and up, if you look at them in a sentence and not know that that's a phrasal verb, chances are we'd be very confused, because bring is to bring something, up is that way, right? But if it's a phrasal verb, then we get, okay, now I understand. If I see in a sentence that it says, she had to bring up her child by herself. All right, it's a phrasal verb. So it means she needed to look after her child till her child was grown by herself. So that's what that means. All right. So now that we have at least a basis on what phrasal verbs are, let's go ahead and actually dive into today's phrasal verbs. What we'll do is we'll look at a sentence, find the phrasal verb, the sentence, and then we will go understand means. And of course, related to crime and punishment, our first sentence is that he broke into the store. Now, we have our sentence and we have our phrasal verb underlined. Our phrasal verb is broke into. Now, what does that mean? Well, break into simply means to enter a building to steal something. Just like our right? It looks like he is breaking into a door. And if you see, here we have break into, and in the sentence it says broke into. So that just means we change the tense. The tense might change, but the definition stays the same. Like if I break into something, I enter to steal something. I don't know, it could be money, it could be something expensive, something valuable. But if I change it from present tense to past tense, I just change the verb to the proper verb tense. So whatever phrasal verb it is, transition from one to another, you just change the verb to the proper tense. You don't have to change everything about. Just know your verb tenses and you'll be okay. All right. Crime, right? Breaking into somewhere. But you can also go ahead and say that he tried to break out of prison. So we're using the same verb of break, but we attach a different word to the second part of our phrase. In this case, it is out. Like he tried to break out of prison. Like in a sentence, break out of simply means to escape from somewhere. Like if someone's trying to break out or break out of, it just means they are trying to escape. So as a criminal, they can try to break into a store, or they can try and break out of prison. And of course, when someone's on the run, right, maybe they successfully break out of prison or they broke into a store. When they try to catch these people, there could be some information they try and find. It says that he's on Jason. What does that mean? If somebody grasses on someone, Well, if someone grasses on a person, means to inform the police about a criminal. Like, for example, if someone broke into a store and someone saw it, or someone broke out of a prison and they saw the criminal, then they can grass on that person. It just means to inform the police. Oh, I saw Jason when he broke into the store, right? There were times. In this phrasal, we have the idea here of grassing on a, like we have grassing on someone. It just means that we go ahead and we change someone into Jason, all right? Now, I see someone mention that there is a break in our connection. Is that the same for everyone else? Like, are we having a break, or can you all still see and hear me? All right, just let me know if anything needs to be fixed. All right, our chat's open for that. All right, so if you grasp on a person, like if you grasp on someone, when you have this word of someone, you can change it into any other noun. For example, you can grasp on someone, grasp on him, grasp on her. You can even go ahead and say a name, right? Like Jason, Sandra, Peter, anything like that. All right. So yeah, so it's okay. All right, but if we have lag sometimes, okay, I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm so sorry for that interruption. The rain's a little crazy at the moment, so I'm so sorry, but we'll try and power through this. All right, my apologies. It's normally not like this. It's just we have a bit of a crazy weather happening right now here in my area, but I hope at least this was clear. So if you have in a phrasal verb, the idea of having a personal pronoun like someone, it doesn't mean you have to leave it as that. You can change it to a name or another personal pronoun, and that's completely okay. All right. So if you grasp on someone, you inform the police about them, or it can be used in a much more simple, I guess, phrasal verb like tip off. Like she tipped off what happened. If you tip off what happened, it just means to give info about illegal activities. It's the same thing. You grasp on a person, it's more specific that you're reporting about a specific person. But if you tip off what happened, you're giving information about what happened. Those are two interesting phrasal verbs that can happen, all right, or that can be used. Now, when we go ahead and there's a tip that the police get, someone was tipped off or they grasped on a person, what the police might do is they will say, we will stake out this area. What does it mean if we stake out an area? Well, if we stake out, it just means to watch outside a building for a crime. So if Jason got grasped on, right, someone reported where Jason was, or somebody tipped off the police where Jason was, then the police will go and stake out that area. They will try and watch that area for the crime or for the criminal. In that case, Jason, right? I'm not saying Jason is actually a criminal, right? But in that case, we're trying to go ahead and emphasize that they're going to stake out this area. And then find someone. So we brought in the suspect. Maybe they caught Jason, right? So they bring him in. So same thing happened here. The phrasal verb itself is bring in, right? Like if we bring in a person, it just means to take them into the police station. So if I change bring into the past tense of brought, but that's okay, right? Because again, the tense might change, but the definition stays the same. So if they brought in Jason or the suspect, they took Jason to the police station. And then when they go ahead and bring them in, he might get locked up. Locked up simply means that they are going ahead and they are being imprisoned or put in jail. Like if Jason got caught, he got sentenced for the crime, he will get locked up. But that doesn't always happen, right? Sometimes they might stake out an area and they might observe an area. They might get away. So I can say that the suspect got away from the detectives. It just means that the suspect escaped from the detectives, right? If the detectives were trying to find him, but he was able to escape and elude capture, he got away. And then what they do is they will have to track down the criminal. When you track down a criminal, it just means that you find the person responsible. So if Jason committed that crime and they staked out his area, but he got away, they will have to track down the criminal to catch him and to lock him. But what might happen in some cases if a person commits a crime is they can turn themselves in. Now, if a criminal, like this sense, the criminal turned himself in, to turn in is our phrasal verb. And that is to surrender yourself to the police. To go ahead and, say, oh, I committed the crime, I'm here, right? That sometimes happens, not a lot, but it can happen. The reason I wanted to look at this phrasal verb is, if we notice, our phrasal verb is turn in. Underlined, turned himself in. Again, we mentioned earlier, some phrase structure, but the definition stays. Basically, if someone turned himself in, it's still fine. It means he surrendered himself to the police. There are times we do have a phrasal verb of two terms, but in the middle, it could be name or a personal pronoun, but that's okay, right? They can still turn themselves in or turn himself in, or it could be turned in himself, whatever it is, right? It still functions the same. So if you sometimes see a phrasal verb split apart by a personal pronoun or a name, that's completely okay. It's not a big deal. The name doesn't change the phrasal verb, all right? So like I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a few activities. And today's activity, we will just practice what we've learned. So up on, we see an incomplete sentence. It says, they tried to blank the culprit. And we have two options. So we have or lock down. From what we've learned today, let me know in the chat, what do you think the proper answer is? Should we say that they tried to lock up the culprit, letter A, or should we say letter B? They tried to lock down the culprit. So let me know in the chat, what do you think the proper answer is here? Should we say that lock up the culprit, or they tried to lock down the culprit? Let me know. What do you all think the proper answer is? Do we lock up a culprit, or do we The proper answer would be, they try to lock up the culprit. Why? Because remember, lock down is a different phrasal verb. Lock up is to imprison, and a culprit is a person who was committing the crime. So if they try to lock, that is the correct answer. Let's try another one up on our screen. It says that my plans brought up yesterday, or my plans fell through yesterday. So these are the two phrasal verb examples we learned at the beginning. Do we say that my plans brought up yesterday, or my plans fell through yesterday? Our proper answer here is fell through. Remember, fell through is failed to happen. Bring up is to raise a child, right? To bring a child from being a little baby to bringing them to be an adult, right? So we can't say my plans brought up yesterday. My plans fell through, all right? So that was just a fun little exercise for us to go over. And we have a couple minutes left, but before we wrap up, just remember our basics to our phrasal verbs. Remember, what is a phrasal verb? Two parts. It's an idiomatic expression, and it's made of a verb plus another word or words. And then, of course, our phrasal verbs about crime, about punishment. There was a lot we used, but of course, keep in mind the proper way to change Hello? Hey everyone, can you guys hear me? Am I back? Am I back? I think I got kicked out again. I'm so sorry for that. I'm so sorry for that. But can everyone hear me? Is everyone here still? Just let me know in the chat. I'm so sorry everyone for today's craziness. I'm so sorry. All right, but I'm back. Okay. All right. Well, we were actually at the end of today's webinar, so that actually just leads to the last portion of today's part, where we just have a little Q&A. I know that, of course, we were having some problems, so if there are any questions that anyone needs clarification on, you can ask it in the chat, and of course, I'll do my best to answer whatever question you might have. For those of you with no questions, I would just like to ask a question up in our poll right now. Did you find today's webinar useful? Did you learn something? Was this beneficial for you? I know maybe we had some lags, so maybe some parts were a little harder to explain, but I do hope, of course, that you were all able to learn and benefit from today's webinar, as that's the goal of our webinar. All right, and we maybe have another minute or two for any other questions. So we'll just run one more poll as we wait. But someone said phrasal verbs are difficult in English. Yes, even for native speakers, Aneta, that's normal. They are quite difficult, even for me sometimes. That's why it's important to take the time to practice and to make sure that we do our best to get through it. All right. So I encourage you guys, practice what we've learned today, and it will take you a long way for sure. All right. So before we wrap up, just remember, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're on social media. Check us out, and I promise you won't regret it. Until next time, everyone, again, I'm so sorry for today's issues with the connection, but thank you for joining us. I hope you had as much fun as possible, and I hope to see you again, maybe through another webinar or even a lesson on the platform. Until next time, everyone, have a great evening. Stay safe as always, and goodbye for now. Take care, everyone.